Hi, my name is Adrian Bernard. I'm also considering changing my last name to Camp, but that's another story entirely. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, and moved from Georgia to California, to Sacramento, California, when I was 6 years old. I was kind of a aloof kid and very sensitive to the world around me, and you could touch me in a way, and I would usually just could go to tears very easily. When I was in high school, I really mourned that I didn't have a father, or didn't grow up with a father who was back in Georgia and had his own psychological phenomenon going on. I immediately started drinking as soon as I came to that realization that that was really a painful thing that I couldn't look at. So I then moved into drinking when I was in sophomore year, and then to pot smoking and drinking in my sophomore year, and then LSD in my senior year, and didn't seem to work too well with my mind, and not knowing that I had a predisposed history to my, I didn't know what psychology or psychological conditions were, and for lack of a better term, I suppose, and that my father was very touched by them. So I graduated high school barely. I should have probably flunked out. I was able to talk my way into having 3 Fs turned into Ds, and I was very outgoing because of the drugs and alcohol, very popular, and had a great time of it. When I turned 19, I started to have bigger problems. When I was 18 and 19, the kind of thinking that was difficult stepped in. I went to a movie, Malcolm X, and I came home from the movie so inspired that I jumped up in the bed and fasted for 7 days, didn't drink water for 4 of those days, and of course when you don't eat and drink, God usually speaks pretty clearly to people, and that's what typically happens. So I was reading the Old Testament in those days, and in that 6 days, and got out of the bed emaciated and distraught, and I moved into a religiosity state where everything had to be sacred, everything had to be divine. I ended up in the hospital a few months after that because I was vacuuming walls, and because I was vacuuming couches, and having a very difficult time organizing my thoughts in any cohesive way. Other than everything had to be sacred, I was washing sheets 7 times or something. Anyway, so they kind of coerced me into coming into the hospital. They're telling me that they were gonna get me there no matter what, and so I better come now. And then they kind of coerced me into taking psychiatric medications, and the first diagnosis, second diagnosis later. I mean, still moving into it. And then when I ultimately came out of it, and as soon as I got clear and off the drugs of the medical drugs, I then started partying back with my old friends that had stayed in town, and then got into my own space. I got kicked out of my house because I was too disruptive, and even though I was a nice guy, I didn't really hurt anybody, but I was just not very conducive to a stable house. And went to a halfway house, went to a board and care first, then to the halfway house, back to the hospital, jumped all over the place, and then into shared housing. And then I couldn't get emotional space from people, or thought space. People's thoughts would become my own, and I couldn't interact with the world around me because I needed my own identity. I needed to find where I was in all of this. During that process of my 20s, I had the terrors of dismemberment. I thought that I was going to be dismembered for past life's crimes, and that I was a horrible being for millennia, and that this life had finally caught up to me because of the most recent past life. So actually, when I was 25, I was on my way to the hospital after spending a couple of weeks on the floor petrified, listening to voices, and going up to heaven and going down to hell, and being told that I was going to be broken into a million pieces in the bottom of hell, and feeling every part of my body of those shards. So my only reaction on the way to the hospital, when I'm thinking that I'm going to be cannibalized in the hospital room, was, it was God at the time, and so my relationship now has changed to the divine, but that it was, if that's what has to be for me, then who am I to refuse? And so this idea of acceptance and being comfortable and okay with basically annihilation, with realizing that this body is not the essence of what I am. I was able to accept the most horrible things about myself, that I could be this horrible human being, that I could be this. Part of my getting through this experience and coming to the other side has been loving even that which is most monstrous, loving the cruel nature that I perceived myself to have, even though no one else was feeding me that I was cruel, but that I really had to learn not to deal with something as a mental illness, but actually that I had to be okay with monstrosity, and I had to be okay with darkness, so that I could find the love that was ultimately within me. And by turning it inward and finding constantly moving inward to myself, and I was able to come through it. I started going to school, and I was able to graduate to school after moving to UC Santa Cruz. I went to UCSC, and I graduated with a history degree and an anthropology degree. I also had another huge breakdown when I got into that school environment. And then voices came in, and it was 9 months of total disorganized thinking and more testing and more divine energies around me, and I was able to connect. The voices were wonderful and also destructive, and I was able to work through it with them and find out what it is how I worked, and as a result, I got through that 9 months and ended up in the hospital yet again a couple of times during that process, and I got to even more clarity. I took a road trip when I graduated from college. For 2 months I was on the road, and then this process has been an evolution of constant growth and constant really finding a way to coexist with the world around me. I think that I've learned that this is not a mental illness. These are actually processes of mental health, and by experiencing these phenomenon, that I believe we become stronger people, and at least I know that I have. But and my peers and my friends and colleagues, I find that there is such strength and humanness and development and potential to really transform not only the way we look at ourselves, but the way that the world looks at us, and the way the world that looks at itself as well. We're finding the essence of what we are, and we're able to share that and transcend this darkness that we feel by being open to it and by embracing those places that are most hurt by life. And to find that has been really the most awe-inspiring thing of all of this, and to be now involved in advocacy has been just a humbling and truth-finding experience through all of it. So, thank you.